Recounting hundreds of assurances from Russia about their nuclear power as the most powerful on Earth, the Americans decided to respond, declaring their intention to use the option of nuclear deterrence. The French responded by reminding everyone that they are the third nuclear power in the equation. Thus, nuclear relations between the West and Russia are experiencing a serious escalation. So what's the next step? What is the motivation behind this escalation? On a different note, members of the U.S. Congress recently called on their government to reactivate their nuclear strategy through new legislation after years of neglect to update it, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the nuclear threat it posed. The strategy of deterrence has a long history, as it began with the emergence of the Napoleonic Wars. Its idea is based on the demonstration of force and lethal weapons to deter and terrorize rival or hostile parties. This strategy is used to avoid entering into destructive wars, in which countries lack sufficient strength to achieve this. On matters related to enriched uranium and strengthening the law on defense production of the industrial base, the senator made statements to the newspaper Defense News, asserting that the old assumptions that expired in 2010, which were supporting their current strategy, will not be enough to counter the long-term threats we face. The U.S. Deterrence Restoration Act is the historic legislation necessary to effectively deter our nuclear adversaries, such as China and Russia, in the future. Regarding the recent statements, the French president noted his country's readiness to discuss the use of nuclear power to ensure the security of Europe, reflecting Paris' emphasis on the Russian challenge and its role as a defender of the European continent. Despite the assurances of the French about their nuclear power, the reality of French capabilities is unclear, especially with the lack of official recognition of the increase in the number of nuclear warheads and the focus on air nuclear weapons only. As for the tensions in Eastern Europe, the French are seeking to emphasize their role and nuclear power as a contributor to the protection of the continent, despite the lack of trust in them by some Eastern European countries that prefer to rely on the United States and its allies. However, the nuclear threat remains a complex issue, as it depends on red lines that should not be crossed, but it remains difficult to determine when the tension may turn into an actual nuclear conflict.